Hey everybody, Cole here with Classic Mini DIY, and on today's episode we're going to be doing a little bit of maintenance on my truck instead of the Classic Mini because unfortunately a set of upper control arms that I have on my truck have had failures of the ball joints on both sides. So the company SPC has been wonderful enough to send me out a warranty claim replacement of those ball joints, and I'm going to show you guys how to replace ball joints on a 3rd gen Tacoma today. Now, before we pop the wheels off the Tacoma and take the old ball joints off, I just want to show you guys, it's super funny. This is the ball joint for the Tacoma. This is an upper ball joint for the upper control arm. And this ball joint is like a fair bit bigger than a Classic Mini ball joint. That is insane. In fact, I actually have a Classic Mini ball joint in hand. Take a look at this. Can you guys tell which one is for the Tacoma and which one's for the Mini? Do you have any guesses? Put your guess in the comments because I'm honestly not sure. Now to start off, we're going to jack the truck up, put those jack stands under there. Don't forget to do that. It's really important. This truck is heavy and you don't want to rely on only your jack to hold it up. It's super unsafe. We're going to get this wheel off and then we're going to be able to get a look at the upper ball joint and get the old one off. We're going to mark where it is and put the new one in so we can get it pretty close to the same alignment. Truck will have to go to an alignment shop to get it perfect after we finish. Okay, so now we have a good look at the upper ball joint, which is the one that failed. Now you can see there is grease everywhere, and this ball joint is the culprit. Essentially, these ball joints were supposed to be something that you could maintain yourself by greasing the top of it and, having a greasable ball joint. But unfortunately, the reality is that these did not retain that grease. And so as a result, pushed all that grease out of the ball joint. And then without grease inside the ball joint here, not enough grease, the whole thing wore prematurely. And we're getting creaking and clunking, and I imagine once we get this disconnected, we're going to see pretty clearly that the ball joint itself is loose inside its housing. So first thing we're going to do is get this nut off of the top here. This is a 32 millimeter nut, and that is something that you'll probably need a breaker bar for. It should be torqued down to 150 foot-pounds, assuming it was installed correctly, which I imagine it was, but we're going to have to torque on that and really get that out of there. Also, before we get this totally out, I am going to mark where this currently is. I want to try and get this so that the camber and caster and everything are all pretty close to where they were before it goes to the alignment shop. It shouldn't be too difficult. We just need to clean this up with some brake cleaner and then mark where it is currently. One other thing that we're going to want to look at before or mark where it is currently is where the hex or star washer is currently oriented. With these SPC arms, basically the way it works is you have a kind of retaining plate in here, and when you rotate this, it changes the position and changes the caster, basically how far forward your wheel is based on where that washer goes in. And so in our case, we want to make sure that we're same spot where we were when this came off. Now the other side, we're also going to need to disconnect. So we're going to go ahead and bend up this cotter pin. You'll also notice that this is where we're starting to see the movement. That's our camber. So that is why I wanted to mark the top of this before we started taking it apart, because as soon as that upper nut is disconnected, you're going to start seeing that movement. Next up, we're going to pop out our ball joint splitter. There is a lot of force holding on this ball joint, especially after you've been putting some miles on it, or if you've been off-roading your truck and putting some abuse on this. So we're going to pop the ball joint splitter over this. It's pretty straightforward, I think. And then depending on how tight this is, you might need differing sizes of wrenches. We're going to go ahead and put some force on this and see if we can get that to pop loose. So now you can see that is all loose. All right, with that, we have both of the kind of things holding this together loose. The next step is to get this out of the connecting rod here. I don't actually know what this is called in this truck. Maybe the top arm, something like that. But we need to disconnect the sensor here first. That is going to prevent us from actually being able to lower this all the way and get that out of the way. So you just gotta find the correct size. I'm sure it's a 10 mil. Yes, like everything. Should give you enough play to get everything out. There we go. So now we've got that disconnected. Let's go ahead and take this out, and I'm gonna hold in the square washer just to make sure we don't get it discombobulated. But you can kind of see that is where the current square washer is sitting, so we'll want to match that up. But you can also see how this ball joint failed out the bottom. Such a mess. Definitely don't want something like this on your truck, and there's a ton of play in this. It's super loose. So very happy we're getting rid of this. Let's clean all of this up so that there's no more grease all over the place, and then we can put that back in place. All right, so now that we have that pretty much cleaned up, the next step is I think I'm gonna go ahead and set this down in here. Oh, that ball joint feels so much better than the other one did. Go ahead and set that in place. Put in our new washer and our new nut. Now this is not an exact science. This part isn't. Keep in mind that you're gonna have to get your truck realigned after this. This is not something that is going to just magically fix it and you'll be all done. It is something that you'll need to get professionally laser aligned afterwards. Otherwise, you are going to have premature wear on your tires and things aren't gonna work the way that they're supposed to. But first up, let's just go ahead and cinch this down. Now I was really hoping that I wouldn't have to disconnect my sway bar here. It's not the end of the world or anything, but I'm just gonna see if I can get away with it. Unfortunately, it does not appear that that is going to happen. Now the next step is torquing this down. You are going to need a torque wrench in order to do this job. And the sheet that comes with this actually has the torque specs on it. This bottom nut needs to be 43 foot-pounds and the top nut needs to be 150. Super important that this gets torqued. Do not just tighten this and call it a day. Do it up properly, torque it down to the spec, and make it safe. Now, if you've never torqued something like this that requires a cotter pin, the way that this works is you torque it up to spec, do those lines line up. There are two sets of holes. In my case, the top hole lines up now, but if it doesn't, you'll just need to continue to torque it past the torque spec until these line up. They should line up pretty close out of the box, but if they don't, never loosen it to get these to line up. Always tighten it past to get those holes to line up. Otherwise, you're going to end up with an improperly torqued ball joint. There we have it. So all we need to do now is reconnect our sway bar end link, get that torqued back up to spec, and last but not least, we're going to reconnect this bolt that holds on this sensor cable. All right, and there we have it. Ball joint replaced and ready for action. So that's all there is to it. There's not really a whole lot of magic associated with this. Just take a look at these things, make sure everything is torqued to spec. While you're down here, it's always good to check the bolts for the steering rack, your sway bar, and the upper control arm bolts. All of these things are points at which things can get loose, especially if you're putting aftermarket parts on your truck. So take the time, make sure it's all good, but other than that, that's pretty much it. We're gonna take all the steps that we just did on this side, recreate them and redo them on the other side, and then we'll be done. All aside from, of course, bringing it to the alignment shop and getting a proper alignment done. All right, so that's really all there is to it. Ball joint jobs on these modern cars, and specifically with this truck with the upgraded SPC upper control arms, is a pretty straightforward job. The important thing is that you are torquing them properly and that you get the truck aligned after you get both installed. So, if you guys have any questions about this job or the truck or anything like that, feel free to post those in the comment section below. Otherwise, I really appreciate you joining me today on Classic Mini DIY. And until I see you guys on the next one, enjoy those minis, Tacomas, and motor on. See ya.